just a couple of a dip into the Wayback Machine for a moment. Thomas Jefferson, some of his letters. This one to Horatio Gates in 1798. The liberty which is pure is to go to all, and not to the few or the rich alone. Here's an 1816 letter to Samuel Kercheval. Those seeking profits, Jefferson wrote, were they given total freedom, would not be the ones to trust to keep government pure and our rights secure. Indeed, it has always been those seeking wealth who were the source of corruption in government. No other depositories of power have ever yet been found which did not end in converting to their own profit the earnings of those committed to their charge. He went on to say in that letter, I am not among those who fear the people. They, and not the rich, are our dependents for continued freedom. We must make our election between economy and liberty. Otherwise, as the people of England are, our people like them must come to labor 16 hours in the 24, and the 16th being insufficient to afford us bread, we must live as they do now on oatmeal and potatoes. We would have no time to think, no means of calling the mismanagers to account, but be glad to obtain subsistence by hiring ourselves to rivet their chains on the necks of our fellow sufferers. In a 1785 letter to James Madison, another means of silently lessening the inequality of property in our country is to exempt all from taxation below a certain point and to tax the higher portions of property in geometrical progression as they rise. So Jefferson, no fan of the rich, in fact, explicitly wary of the rich, but the rich pretty much taking over the country. The front page of today's New York Times, lobbyists bearing gift pursue attorneys general. They talk about how 5 Hour Energy was about to be investigated by AGs in more than 30 states. What did they do? They threw a bunch of money at it. Hire a lobbying firm, hire a PR firm, get in there and take these guys to Lowe's Santa Monica Beach Hotel in California, wine them and dine them. And actually they got, AT&T, Microsoft, all these big companies that succeeded in using money to corrupt the political process in the United States. Front page of today's New York Times. So, it seems to me that we have a problem here. Here to speak on behalf of the rich guys who want to buy our democracy is Paul Sherman, senior attorney with the Institute for Justice, IJ.org. Paul M. Sherman is your Twitter account. Hey, Paul, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, Tom.
So you've heard Jefferson's case. You've heard my case. Make yours.
Well, the case we're making is the case for freedom. Now, you can say a lot about the amount of money that's spent in politics, but you can compare that to other things that we spend money on. And so, for example, in 2012, we spent about $7 billion in a country with a voting age population over 200 million people. This Halloween, we're going to spend about $8 billion on candy and costumes and things to celebrate this holiday.
That has nothing to do with it.
Well, what it's designed to do, Tom, is to give us a little bit of perspective on how much $7 billion is in a country with 300 million
But that's not perspective. You're comparing Halloween candy to voting. Halloween candy is not essential to our democracy. Halloween candy is not how we govern ourselves. Halloween candy has absolutely nothing to do with how we govern ourselves. Halloween candy has nothing to do with the fate of our nation. You're suggesting that because we spend a lot, because over the last couple of election cycles, back when Reagan came into office, in today's dollars, we had never had an election with more than $500 million spent in it. And now we're looking at, in fact, more than $100 million spent in it. And now we're looking at billions as a consequence of these policies that are promoted by right-wingers like Antonin Scalia. And it's $7 billion is $7 million 1,000 times. I don't know anybody who could come up with that, frankly.
Well, we certainly spend more on campaigning.
I actually know one person who could come up with it, who I know personally, but that's it.
We certainly spend more on campaigning now than we did in the 1980s, but there are a couple of causes for that. Number one, there's a lot more television advertising now than there was in the 1980s. But number two, and this is not surprising, the cost of campaigning has gone up in lockstep with the rise of the federal budget. We've got a government that spends $3.8 trillion a year. It's not at all surprising that people want to influence how that money is being spent.
And we have a political process being run out of the Supreme Court that is starting in 1976 with the Buckley case, and then in 77 or 78 with First National Bank versus Bellotti. Those two cases saying that money is speech and that corporations can participate in the political process explicitly. Lewis Powell authoring the majority opinions in those. He, the guy who wrote in 1971 the Powell memo, laying out how the right-wingers, how the wealthy, the billionaires could take over America. And then the Supreme Court with Citizens United and now McCutcheon is saying, sure, rich people, throw all the money in you want. What I don't understand, Paul Sherman, is how, unless you yourself are a billionaire, if you're or even a multimillionaire, if you're really, really rich, I get it that you are here speaking on behalf of your class and your interests. But if you're just a guy taking a paycheck, I don't get where it is to your benefit, to my benefit, or to American democracy's benefit that fewer than 12,000 households in America can afford to actually buy their own politician.
Well, there's something that comes in between political spending and election outcomes that I think you're leaving out, and that's the American voter. Voters are not empty vessels who have opinions poured into their head, and political money is not monolithic. You have people like the Koch brothers on one side, or Sheldon Adelson, but on the other side you have people like George Soros.
George Soros has not supported a candidate for political office since 2008. Period. The Koch brothers this year are putting over $400 million into elections. George Soros, zero. Koch brothers, $400 million. I wouldn't call that an equivalence.
There are other people on the left who are putting millions of dollars.
You got Tom Steyer put $50 million into climate change stuff.
Sure,
that's
it. What this money?
That's not $500 million. $400 million.
This money is not being handed out to voters on street corners. This money is being spent on political advertising, and whether that advertising works is left entirely up to voters.
Paul, earlier on, you basically misstated reality. You said the reason why campaign spending has gone up so much is because it costs more to campaign and because the stakes are higher because the federal government controls so much money. Well, the stakes are not consequentially that much higher. It's that it used to be illegal. After all the illegality of what Nixon did was exposed in 72 and the Church Commission, took it all apart, in 73 we passed laws, bipartisan laws. We passed laws to both Republicans and Democrats were horrified by this, saying enough already. The maximum individual donation is $2,100 and you can't do money that is invisible. I mean, and the Supreme Court took down that law. That's what's going on here. Our democracy is being corrupted by rich people and big transnational corporations purely for their own profit. They don't give a rat's ass about you and me, and they're destroying our country.
Tom, there's not a shred of evidence that campaign finance laws have done anything to reduce political corruption or to improve public trust in government. And we can see that.
That's because you can't prove a negative, Paul.
Well, you know what? When we're dealing with the First Amendment, the burden of proof falls on the person who
No, you can't prove a negative. You can prove a positive. What you can show is that after those laws went into place in 1973, there was substantially more transparency in spending. There was and that when those laws were taken away by the Supreme Court, suddenly we're having elections where people are basically selling out. I mean, I talk to Republican politicians as well as Democrats. They're horrified by the fact that they have to spend half of every day begging for money from rich people. The only people who win in this situation, Paul, and I don't understand why you're defending them, are the billionaires.
The reason why I am defending spending on political speech is because peaceful political persuasion is the way that we resolve our differences in this country. And it is incumbent on the
government. But not with advertising. There's a reason why Procter & Gamble spends billions on advertising. It influences people's decisions. There's a reason why the Koch brothers are spending $400 million in this election cycle. It will influence people's decisions, unless you think the Koch brothers are completely stupid.
Well, ultimately, Tom, we have two options. Either we can allow voters to decide for themselves what messages they want to consider before they cast their ballot, or the government can decide that for them. And in a country with a
No, those are not the two decisions, Paul.
That question is clear.
Those are not the two decisions. The third one, which is the one that we had after 73, is we can say you must be transparent about where your money's going. The spending money is not speech, it's behavior.
Spending money facilitates speech.
No, it doesn't. It's a behavior. Well, sure, it facilitates speech.
Constitutional rights.
So does standing on the top of a tall building facilitate speech. It doesn't mean you have a right to do it.
Look, if the government passed a law that said you can...
Hang on, Paul. Hang on. I'm sorry, we're out of time. Hang on.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Paul Sherman, the senior attorney with the Institute for Justice, IJ.org. Sorry, Paul, a guy always steps on us. Thanks for being with us today.
That's no problem.